coming up on this episode of the Soul Twin Stars podcast.
And as you start to give to others and there's more fulfillment in yourself and you're whole in yourself, the relationship just self-corrects.
Last night was one of those incredible nights.
How do we give more permission and space for us to, at every stage of life, check in and say, does this work for me?
We were sampling products, not like sampling them in front of each other, but we were touching the products and, the lubricants and the gel sleeves and the vibrating parts.
At different times in our lives, our love life might look very different. And to stay true to what's love asking of me now.
But I have been in several relationships with women during my marriage, of course, with complete blessings and openness and permission.
Hi, I'm Lady Shadowe, a witch with much to share, stirring the cauldron with magical self-care.
Hi, I'm Peaceful Nick, a medium divine. I chat with the dead and interpret every sign.
We are Soul Twin Stars, best friends through it all.
From spells to healing, we're answering the call.
From moon cycles to menopause and making peace with the dead.
We aren't afraid to talk about what's rarely said.
So tune in each week to get raw, real, and wise.
Let's talk about a spiritual life with absolutely no disguise. Welcome to the Soul Twin Stars podcast, Uninhibited Spirituality. Peaceful Nick and Lady Shadowe here, and first and foremost, we would like to thank our sponsors for this episode. Thank you to Nadine Gordon-Taylor, intuitive artist, author, speaker, and teacher. She's also the visionary creator behind a series of soul-stirring oracle decks, including the Animal Love Oracle cards, the Heart Path Oracle, the Crystal Clear Oracle deck, and the highly anticipated Plant Spirits Oracle, arriving this fall of 2025. Her work blends mystical insight with artistic mastery, offering tools that inspire deep connection and inner wisdom. Explore Nadine's full collection at thethirdEyestudio.com or experience her magic in person at her beautiful Peekskill, New York storefront, The Third Eye Studio. To purchase her oracle decks, visit innertraditions.com. Thank you, Beans and Buttercream Bakery. Delicious homemade treats shipped anywhere. Call 417-973-2352. Also, Abernathy Photography, based in southwestern Kentucky, a professional and stellar company providing drone photography and destination weddings. Visit abernathyphotography.com. And author Mary Ray's self-reflection workbook on conquering shame and guilt. Tell the Devil to Go to Hell. Get it now on Amazon. And craving delicious Italian cuisine? You can find it right here in Westchester County, New York, at Fino Restaurant at 1 Baltic Place, Croton-on-Hudson, New York. All of our sponsors are linked up on our Facebook page. And now, back to our episode.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Soul Twin Stars podcast. Tonight, we are spiritually naked, sexy, and sacred, and we are so excited for our guest tonight. I want to talk about a story, a little fun story. Everyone's curious about intimacy and all different kinds of sexual products, I'll say.
If you have a kid in the room, by the way, who doesn't want to hear about us talk openly about these things, maybe sneak into your own private hideaway in your house.
Put your AirPods
for this
on.
podcast. Yes.
Don't listen to this on the way to school with the kiddos, for sure. I was at one of those little parties where they sell intimate products, and I was with a bunch of women, of course. It was a lady party.
And it was a Tupperware party, right?
Pardon?
It was a Tupperware party, right?
Yeah, right. Lots of plastic and rubber. Silicone.
No lid.
Yeah. Europe versus America. Anyway.
Go on, girlfriend.
So, yes, we were sampling products, not like sampling them in front of each other, but we were touching the products and, the lubricants and the gel sleeves, et cetera, the vibrating parts, looking at all the different choices. And I had been married for a very long time, and I'm still married. And my friend who I was with had been married for a very long time as well. And then there were some women who weren't married there. And we were leaving and we were talking about some of the women commenting on the fact that they don't have satisfactory sex with their
Mm.
partners. And my friend Ashley said, well, I think it's because we are in long-term relationships and we have time to build intimacy and let our partners know what we like and want. And these other women making those comments about not being satisfied, a lot of times are having one night stands and don't build that intimacy to where you can be open enough to talk about your wants and needs. On that note, which I thought was a great point, how was your week sexually?
Sexual relations. Speaking of that, last night was incredible. As you know, as a longtime married person, I've been married for more than 20 years. You have been married more than 20 years. And you do have to still take time. You still have to take care in planning those moments and when you can give your best to those moments and when you can just say, okay, I only have 10 minutes. Let's have some quick fun, right?
Right.
But last night was one of those incredible nights where I was able to spend an hour or two, each of us with our favorite perfume and cologne on, each of us freshly out of the shower. We had our little mood lighting going and all of the makeout from the old days, the early new relationship energy, that heightened attraction period in the beginning of your relationship, right?
Right.
So my husband and I love to connect on that level, go back to the old days. We call it like old day sex. So
Good. That's
we
so
have a lot of,
important. So
it is,
important.
it is. And you can do that, gussing up a little bit or having a nice massage first to relax each other into it. So we had a nice massage. I enjoy kissing and he has the most beautiful lips, right? You know that. And he's clean shaven. So there's no, barriers to his lips, if you know what I mean. And so we just had a wonderful, wonderful night together. And even though we have a very healthy sexual relationship, I must fully disclose, and it's no secret that I am openly bisexual. I lead the parade in New York City sometimes, the Pride Parade, on our motorcycles, and I ride with the siren, and I wear my LGBTQ. I put the B in the flag very proudly. And I've worked with LGBT organizations as a volunteer, so I'm very proud of my community and supportive of that. But I have been in several relationships with women during my marriage, of course, with complete blessings and openness and permission. And I've also brought some of my lovers in, as you know, Nick, because over the years I've shared my wonderful experiences with you to
Yes.
share with my husband. So we have been poly at times. We are mostly monogamous only because we just get in these ruts where it's just us. And after COVID, we moved out of New York City a bit. So we have a little less opportunity to mingle with more of our kind. But overall, it's a very fulfilling and wonderful relationship to sometimes have those experiences and relationships outside of the marriage, bring them in, get to know people, have some beautiful, intimate fun. There's no jealousy. We've worked through all of our jealousy issues where that comes up occasionally, especially in the beginning, where you have to really go baby steps to build to those relationships and relations. And, I know that you have been curious over the years, Nick, about being in same-sex relationships. I would love a refresher on what level you have ever taken that to, if any, or what level you have surmised to fantasize about it.
I love that question. That's a great question. And curiosity about sexual relationships with same-sex partners, transgender partners, any partners of any kind, that are adult consenting humans, disclaimer.
Yes.
Fantasies are perfectly natural. People having curiosities are perfectly natural. I believe 90% or more of people fantasize about same-sex relationships or unusual relationships that wouldn't be the standard societally accepted relationship. And yes, I have had all different kinds of fantasies, and I think fantasies are healthy. I share them with my partner as he does with me. We've been married almost 30 years. And I think that people who suppress their curiosity, people who suppress their fantasies. People like with that attitude are likely the people shouting the loudest from the rooftops about being against any type of non-traditional heterosexual relationship. People who are homophobic, people are scared of their own desires, and often you'll see in the news people shouting the loudest about why gay people should go to hell are often the people having secretly gay relationships on the side outside of their marriage, which is bad. You should not do that without the permission of your
Yeah,
partner. So
exactly.
I think that it is, people should be more open and in touch with who they are and what their fantasies are, and not degrade others because they're holding a secret in their mind that hasn't or has come to fruition.
And it's okay to talk about these things with your partner
Yes.
because if you do, and even if it's a crazy fantasy, again, involving consensual adults, it
Humans, no
frees
aliens.
you. Right. No farm animals. It frees you to be freer both in the bedroom and in your relationship, because if you can tell your partner anything that's so intimate and so vulnerable and may even sound crazy, if you can talk about it with them, there's nothing really more to hide, especially if your partner accepts that part of you and encourages the fun and the funny and the ridiculous. I had a boyfriend once that wanted to use a lot of food on me, whipped cream and melted butter and lobster. And sadly, I'm allergic to lobster, so that was a mess. Um, but
Hives.
I was really thankful that he opened up about the things that were interesting to him. And because we're all human and we have these imaginations and we should put them to good use.
And if you're with a partner that is uncomfortable hearing normal fantasies and normal wants and needs, maybe reevaluate that partnership, because we should all be free in our relationship to share what we desire.
And we also encourage good, healthy boundaries. I mean,
Yes.
obviously, if somebody says to you, hey, I really want to watch my wife with another man come in and tie her up and penetrate her for 3 hours while I sit in the corner and evaluate the performance. Well, if that's not comfortable for everyone in the room, then that's something for your partner to say, no. I love that you brought that up and that might be a fantasy of yours, but I have to be realistic. That's never going to happen. So it's okay to say that won't happen in real life, but I'm glad you shared it with me. It's okay to talk about all kinds of cool things sexually. And we're just saying, go to your safe space and try to be as intimate as you can with your partner, especially if you're married or if you're committed long term, because that's only going to help your whole entire relationship blossom.
Right. And definitely hold your boundaries if you're uncomfortable. Don't let somebody push something on you that you are not comfortable with just to stay in a relationship. Definitely,
Oh,
if you're a younger person who doesn't have a lot of experience and someone's pushing you into doing something you're not comfortable with, and you just want that love and you want to keep that relationship, please, for your own good, do not ever allow somebody to cross those boundaries with you.
yes, all boundaries must be negotiated ahead of time. My
Yes.
husband and I, when we were first experimenting with bringing another woman into our relationship, we luckily chose the right woman. She was very communicative. We talked about things that might be triggering, things that are completely safe to do in this situation and that situation. I think one of the boundaries in the beginning was that I preferred my girlfriend and my husband to only be intimate if I was present. But if I was working and they were out in the world and they wanted to kiss or hold hands, no problem. It was just about certain acts being shared together as where other things should be done separately. And if there was some sort of crossing of a boundary or something questionable, that you would come to me about it and talk to me about it first, like, oh, hey, we were in the heat of the moment. We kind of did this or did that. As long as there's some open, trusting communication going, I didn't mind. Now, that was in the beginning. When we first started later on, it was just everything free flowed and there were no more restrictions. But you have to start out things like this with baby steps. That's all we're saying. Talk about it every step of the way.
Thank you for that, Lady Shadow. That will be so helpful to others who are experiencing the same thing.
Yes, now we are so excited to introduce a very special guest on our episode today, someone that I have been a fan of and been following since 2012. They have been a huge influence in my life as an open bisexual, sometimes poly person myself. And I absolutely love the healthy, sensual, and thoughtful path that Kamala Devi McClure, also known as KD, has paved for so many people of all levels and proclamations of lifestyles, from monogamy to polyamory. KD is a shamanic guide, a pansexual genderqueer art activist and author who's been a muse and a mentor for over 2 decades. They starred on Showtime's reality TV series Polyamory, Married and Dating, and was featured on Dr. Drew, Tyra Banks, and the award-winning documentary Sex Magic. They have 20 years of teaching Tantra and temple arts around the world, and they have written several books, including Sacred Sexual Healing, Sex Shamans, and Polyamory Pearls. Calling KD an inspiring sex positive and a sexually celebratory goddess is an understatement. So thank you so much, KD, for being here today. You have so much to offer this world.
I feel so honored. Thank you, Lady Shadowe.
Thank you. The honor's all ours. So I watched and enjoyed your series on Showtime 12 years ago, and I was in my first polyamorous relationship during the airing and watching of that show. And it was so validating and relatable for me because I also had a really super healthy pod at the time, really gratifying. And your appearance on that show, it validated the fact that it felt so natural and organic because of you, but your nurturing way of talking about how to be poly, and that anything outside of a traditional relationship, the way you made it sound was so endearing and comfortable and relaxing and took all the stress and anxiety out of being poly in the first place. So I was wondering if you would be able to share with us some of the things that you went through at the time. How was your sacred sexual journey? What was that like when you were filming and opening yourself up so publicly to that lifestyle too? And just in general, how was that experience for you?
Yeah, thank you. I get a lot of feedback like yours where people, it's found because it's like they were experiencing it, they were trying it out, they were fumbling along, and then all of a sudden they're like, wow, somewhere, the media finally has some place to like a mirror to see myself. I think it was a groundbreaking show because of the timing. Prior to that, I think every representation of poly was like, we are sex addicts, or we're or we're back in the free love time of drugs, and so the representation was just not available. And then here we are only 12 years later, and polyamory is like a legitimate alternate lifestyle. And it wasn't before. It was something that was done in the shadows by freaks only. So I feel like we made a massive contribution to changing the narrative. But like anybody who's speaking into the unspeakable, there was a lot of resistance. There was a lot of challenge and testing. So, to sum up, how was my experience? Well, there was 2 parts. The personal me and my pod, we were really struggling, even with the perspectives of the camera crew. It was hard. And then on the transpersonal level, which is like my soul's mission and what I'm here for, I felt so like enlivened by the opportunity to tell the world that there's more ways to love, and it just felt really on purpose. And so I would say that there was a big fracture for me between what was happening for me personally and then what was happening in the realm of like soul purpose, and that was one of the biggest challenges I've ever had to face. I'm proud of the show, but it definitely was expensive on me. Mental health.
Oh no.
Including, yeah, it was really expensive afterwards. That the after effects of it was also, mixed reviews. And so I'm on the other side of that whole journey, able to look back and, be grateful for the challenges and super grateful for where we are today. But yeah, and then I get to meet like people like you who are like-minded, doing great work in the world. You guys do the show every Friday. Is that what oh my gosh, that's wonderful. And so I just feel like the world is awakening, and we get to meet each other and keep sharing medicine.
I just want to tell you, you were medicine for me, because had it not been for your wonderful, authentic portrayal on the show, I had strength to keep my pod healthy at the time. And even though you were fracturing, which you could not tell, and I'm so sorry that you went through that, you were giving the rest of us like an uplift of confidence and hope and love. And so that I am so grateful.
Could I ask a question? What was the struggle? Was it the crew, the invasiveness? Was it the relationship? What can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, so we had a wonderful crew, actually. The director was a true visionary. The struggle was ego confronting. Like, it's one thing to be like, okay, I'm going to perform my identity. I'm going to share my lifestyle. But it's another whole thing to say, I'm going to invite the cameras into my bedroom and share it's not like just the erotic sexual part, because it was adult late night programming that, Showtime is like, wants you to get raw and naked. And, and we were real, like really real. We're not, porn stars. We're not like performing. It's like, this is our real relationship. But beyond the physical, the intimacy and the depth of letting cameras into our insecurity, our jealousy, which is already really, really stretching us. But then when you add the window of, we don't know who's going to see this and how they're going to judge us, and all of that pressure is a lot. And I have to say, like, we made it through the shows, and it was after the show that things started to fall apart for me. And part of that was the poly community was not real happy at the time with how sexualized it was. The poly community at the time, the kind of banner catchphrase was, it's not about sex, like it's about love, which is so true. It is about love, but it's also about sex.
Right. And sex sells, and what do people want to see on Showtime at late at night?
And not just for the viewer's sake, like polyamory is a radical thing of sharing your body with other lovers. You can have as many friends or spiritual teachers as you want. Nobody gets upset. It doesn't challenge your marriage. But the minute you start sharing your fluids and your body and then everybody's up in arms. And so for us to be like, it's all about love is not true. It's only partial truth. So to stand in a sex positive place to say, yes, it's about love, we'll show that, but we're also really willing to show how sex is the great button pusher, and it's going to trigger us. It also triggered a lot of criticism.
Don't worry. Christians are not only mad at polyamorous couples, they're also mad at mediums and other spiritual people.
Yeah. Like, I'm going to put myself in your shoes for a moment. You expect the Christians to be upset. What if you put out there an inside show look at your work and other mediums were mad at you? Like your community of psychics were saying, hey, I don't like the way you're doing it.
And because in the United States, there's no actual governing body. There are a lot of battles. I'm a no drama mama. I don't get involved in it. I don't want to know about it. I'm just trying to do ethical work and help people heal. But there are a lot of drama-filled things happening in the spiritual community. I just stay out of it.
Yeah, similarity between sex and spirit, because when it comes to Tantra and sexuality, there's no real governing bodies, or a lot of them that say, get this certificate to do sex therapy, or if you're going to touch the body, you have to drape these parts and you'll lose your license if you act this way. It's a mess. But both psychic spaces and sexual spaces are really in that gray area of, you're listening to source and you have to trust your own intuition and integrity, and not be held to what's culture tell you should do.
And I think that's a great point. And before Lady Shadow gets to the next question, I would just like to say nothing has made me feel closer to source than having a wonderful, intimate connection with my husband. Like
Mm.
it is so spiritual to me and so important to me and so sacred to me. And there's no other feeling like it. Like it's
Mm.
beautiful to me. That's how
Yeah.
I look at my intimate relationship.
Thank you, Katie, for all of that input and helping us understand what you went through. It seems like in general, just everybody's a little more on edge and is just too quick to judge rather than just focus on finding joy and happiness in our life. Just 5% of the US considers themselves or identifies as poly. And I'm curious that there's this giant amount of infidelity culture that seems to be so accepted, more so than opening up a marriage. And if you discuss this with a partner, well, why don't we open up? Or you're attracted to other people, I'm attracted to other people. Sometimes your partner tells you when that happens, and sometimes they don't. But I know why I am attracted to people in spirit. I'm sure very much like you, whatever gender, it's a spirit thing. And if it's a connection and it becomes romantic, I have the freedom, thank goodness, with my husband and enough trust and like Nicole, a spiritual bond that is unbreakable. If we want to go outside of that marriage and explore a connection with somebody else, for me it's comfortable. But how do you feel how the infidelity culture overrides the idea of an open relationship? And how do we sort of educate the public that this is something that could be considered? How do you feel about, again, breaking those walls and saying to a couple, hey, if you're talking to me about your cheating, but you are not open to this over here, you know?
Got it. Yeah. Wow. So I'm going to circle back to the question of like, is polyamory a possible solution for this massive infidelity problem that we see that's an epidemic? Here we are, three female bodies who are married to men, finding like having very deep spiritual committed, partnerships, like as a like relationship is a school, a spiritual training ground that gets us closer to God through our personal love. And I love that I'm with two non-drama mamas, and I have to just confess, I am a drama queen. And like the show was a symptom of that. I wish that I could be as peaceful and easeful in sharing my husband as like, oh, that's just my nature. And there are people in the world that for whom that is the most natural thing and they don't get jealous. But karmically in this lifetime, I struggle a lot with insecurity, jealousy, insecure attachment. Like I just want to say it has not been easy. And so just because I've been doing it for 25 years doesn't, it definitely gets easier. But at the same time, I don't want anybody who's starting off to compare themselves to myself or to you where you're at. It's like, it's so much work at the beginning. I would never say to someone has cheating, their partner's cheating or they're cheating, that, hey, they should consider polyamory. Because to me, cheating is the opposite of polyamory.
Exactly.
So what it takes to be polyamorous is a fierce commitment to truth and being able to speak the uncomfortable and say the thing you don't want to say. People who are cheating are usually doing that because they don't have the courage to admit their own desires or to have the difficult conversations, or they actually have the opposite of what it takes. And so when I talk to people who have infidelity, that's a whole other set of problems, which I'm happy to work with people on repairing trust and betrayal, which often happened in their own childhood. But the thought of going from infidelity to, it's like going from the bottom of the ladder to being like, now I want you to do this graduate school acrobatic thing in poly or in opening your relationship. And I would say, don't you dare do that.
Yeah.
You're going to fall and break a neck.
I agree with you. One of the reasons I would not choose polyamory, even though it's wonderful to fantasize about. And we talked earlier in the show about fantasies and healthy fantasies prior to you joining. I would be exactly how you are. I have insecurities. I've been married a long time, but it doesn't change for me. I still would be very uncomfortable with bringing another person physically. I would never, ever want to be with another man. That would be a no for me. But that's because of my past history with other things. With infidelity, statistics are about 60% of marriages have experienced at least one infidelity that we know of. There are obvious reasons for that. Do you feel like you have any wisdom or insight into what are some of the root causes for infidelity, and why isn't our culture moving into a more healthy way of dealing with that rather than what is happening with our culture now?
It is beautiful to me that there are other paradigms, that it's not like death do you part is the only option. And more, I feel that our culture is already self-correcting. When we hit that point where it was 50% of marriages end in divorce, I think that was a huge wake-up call. And then things have shifted. My son is 18, so he's a young man. I'm looking at his generation and all of his friends, and most of them, monogamy is not assumed. There's a whole new generation of people that are saying, let's try not just polyamory, but like there's a whole plethora of designer relationships. Let's build our relationship in a way that works for us. And so part of this statistic of 60%, whatever the statistic is like a residue from old thinking and old way of being. And even though scientific studies are flawed because they're looking through a monogamous lens, but in general, the deepest strategy for everybody, no matter what kind of lifestyle or orientation they have, is like know yourself and be true to that. And if you're on a path of knowing yourself and you fall in love, your partner is a mirror and a reflection of like, here's an opportunity to know myself even better. They're bringing up my shadows, they're bringing up my preferences and my aversions, and like, let's use the relationship as a school so that we can both know ourselves better as whole people, not from the old paradigm of you complete me.
Oh my gosh. I say that to people all the time. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Great.
But people always ask me, how will I find my partner, my love, my soulmate? And I'm always like, you complete me is the worst thing that ever happened in a minute. And I say that, complete yourself.
Absolutely. And because, you're a spiritual teacher, it's the very distinction between I'm using love to compensate for my unmet needs that I didn't get in my childhood, and I'm perpetuating, like my personal wounding into this toxic relationship. It's like the minute we say, oh, I'm coming from whole, I'm going to not start looking outside of myself, not see a relationship as a fix or a balm for what I didn't get, and instead be like, how can I come whole, meet another whole person, and then we shift into a spiritual relationship or a soul relationship,
right,
which is totally different than a personality clinging, needing,
right,
transactional bond,
Right.
So I'm really delighted that I feel the world is really waking up to that. And what it takes is my partner is a mirror for me to see if I'm frustrated with them, if I want them to be different. Those are pointing out places that I'm not whole in myself.
Right. Someone is healed and whole enough, they have the ability to discern if their partner is appropriate for them or not.
And I think that's where I was with my husband. We feel like we were soulmates from the start. There were several incidences that we were supposed to meet before we did, but we missed the chance by seconds. And we're talking, we lived across the country from each other. So we finally came together. We had this great romance. We got engaged. When it came time to choose the wedding date, I was like, oh, I don't want to leave you. I love you so much. And yes, I'm going to marry you. And randomly, I was just like, I think I'd like to experiment with that. Like, would you be okay with that? And we had this long talk. And it just, like you were saying, KD, we just evolved to this place as two spiritual, super close, like soul twins, like I consider Nicole. Now, like you, KD, I also in the beginning, we had to have strict boundaries. We had to talk about what was okay right now, what might be okay later. We will not break those rules at the heat of the moment. I mean, we didn't even have a playbook. This was before the Showtime series aired. So we were just on our own with this. We had our pitfalls too, but it's so nice to come out of it on the other side. Like you were saying, a more spiritually matured, joyful person, because if you can literally be okay with sharing your partner fully with someone else that you trust as much as your partner, you see the world with whole new eyes. I'm a Scorpio, so I've spent the first 28 years of my life as a bit jealous, and we can talk about jealousy later, but like you, I know that, that's your most asked question. I understand where that comes from, and you do have to be so cognizant of all the steps along the way, and it doesn't come easy. All this boils down to the simplicity of how can I have a more joyful connection with my earth, with myself, with my sexuality, with my needs, with my desires, with giving myself away to those desires and needs and sharing them with the most important person in my life. And then when someone else comes along and compliments that, sharing it with them. So 100% on trying to change the paradigms, not necessarily jumping like we were talking about from polyamory to infidelity or back the other way. But like you said, just to know yourself and to catch the problem before it gets out of hand. And if there are alternatives, then people need to be talking about it, whether it's go to therapy, seek a spiritual shaman, or there's so many different ways to heal the parts of ourselves, both sexually and egotistically, so that we can be better people just for our planet in general, not just for our partner. And I know that that's your next level work, I think, is teaching people that from the spiritual side.
Yeah, it's a fractal, as you kind of name this love of self overflowing, through our sexuality to our partners, then to our community, then to the culture at large, over to the planet. There is like an evolutionary direction. And I will say that the distinction between like personality love that is usually coming from wounding or trauma bonding is that it's like me, separate self. How can this relationship heal me or be about me? And then, or us, or we. But really, when we get into soul partnerships, we start to see that our relationship can be dedicated to something bigger. It isn't just about us. Like, we come together, we're more than the sum of each other separately. So let's overflow this to whether it's the community or a project or to the world or the earth. So I'm really delighted that you brought that up, because sometimes I'll be working with a couple and there's rupture, there's jealousy, and really the answer to like, how do they get out of that agonizing spiral, the downward spiral, isn't just better communication and let's work on it. It's like, get over yourselves and dedicate your love to something much bigger, and sometimes it's put all that processing and all that wounding on hold as you become a being of service. And as you start to give to others and there's more fulfillment in yourself and you're whole in yourself, the relationship just self-corrects. And sometimes it self-corrects so much that you realize, hey, that's not my partner. My soul's here for a reason, and that soul's not supporting that reason. Right. But it is valuable for us to not pathologize our relationships by cutting them off from a bigger ecosystem. Like, we exist as a symphony. We're part of something much bigger than ourselves. And, when we're in deeply aligned soul relationships, that will reveal itself.
Thank you, Katie, for that. Exactly. And that's why I feel like when we are in a happy, healed place, spiritually, sexually, emotionally, and can communicate and free ourselves from the fear-based side of life. We go, because there's love and fear. I believe that there's just those two states. And of course, jealousy, anxiety, depression, anger all comes from the fear side. And once we can tap into that more love side, and like you said, higher purpose, not just in our relationships, but in general, it keeps all the drama kind of down where it belongs, because we're so busy, like you said, being of service and sharing good, happy things. That's what Nick and I's purpose for this podcast is, to free people of some of the mundane worries, the 1D flat line of the fear-based world, and elevate people to talk about things that are unsaid a lot of the time. And you're doing a wonderful job helping with that today. So thank you.
I would like the audience to know, why is this combination of, polyamory and whatever type of pod or quad people choose, why is this more fulfilling to you, to other people, the human race in general? And how do you help people combine all of this when they have, other human stuff going on, and to see a sexual act differently from just a physical act to, a more spiritual, three-dimensional, five-dimensional act?
Mm-hmm. First, our relationship choices are quite fluid, or can be fluid, if we allow them to, the question isn't like, what's the form that's most fulfilling to me? I happen to be married, and we have a constellation about a dozen other lovers who we've known for decades. Like we have deep, intimate family. That's just the expression of my soul. Mm-hmm. And there are some incredibly evolved, satisfied, fulfilled people in deep monogamous partnerships. And there's some seriously dysfunctional monogamous partnerships. And I've seen some verifiably dysfunctional, open relationships. So the form isn't the answer. I want to advocate that people, be true to their own nature, and at different times in our lives, our love life might look very different, and to stay true to what's love asking of me now, because it may be that the partner that someone's with, if they would have met them now, who they are now, you turn and you say, if I met you right now, would I be with you? And you have to kind of soul search and say, is it still true? Or is it because we made that commitment and we're just kind of going through the motions, and society says a successful relationship is to stay together? So, it's a complex question, but I think ultimately relationship is a school, to support us in knowing the divine. It's not just knowing ourselves. It's like some people we're here to get close to the divine. And honestly, some people get there without relationship altogether. Like, hey, the happiest path is to be a monk and to be celibate. So I want to deeply celebrate freedom of choice. And we have a culture that has a standard narrative. And what we're doing here is saying, let's just question that narrative. Like, that may work for some people. And how do we give more permission and space for us to, at every stage of life, check in and say, does this work for me? And if not, how can we be in a more true, beautiful love story?
I love that. And it makes me think of what you would advise people, any people who are thinking about going into a polyamorous relationship. Do's, do nots, shoulds, definitely should nots. Who is prime for serious dysfunction, and who is prime for maybe a wonderful experience in the relationship?
Yeah, the criteria, if I was to say, and there's a whole kind of cluster of qualities that make for successful open relationships. And one of them, deep criteria, is like, are you responsible and aware of like, hey, I'm creating my reality. I'm taking responsibility for how I show up to love. And I'm coming from a generous, full place where I have so much love to give. I want to give it to multiple people. If you're coming from a place of lack and you're saying, ooh, I'm not getting enough sex in this relationship, so I want someone else, or I'm not getting enough attention from my husband, so I want to have, more, or you're wanting to open because you're feeling that yearning for something you don't already have within yourself or within your relationship, then you're likely going to continue to perpetuate more lack. And that creates even more exponential suffering. Now you're not just suffering with your husband, you're suffering with your multiple partners and his partners. And so when my partner actually brings someone home to meet, or like part of the process of like, wow, is this someone I really resonate, someone I can trust? It's really a question of, are they in deep abundance?
Right.
They know who they are, they're overflowing, they're generous with their love, or are they in a needy place of wanting to get from the relationship instead of give to?
I love that too. And I think that may be true of all relationships and all aspects of life. I teach this as well. When you're coming from a place of lack, you're going to block abundance. In your experience with your personal case studies, the couples, the poly groups that you help, what is the range of dysfunction caused by? So if you have a super healthy polyamorous group pod versus a super dysfunctional group or pod, what do you think causes the dysfunction versus the healthiness of the relationship?
So in addition to having just talked about lack and abundance,
Right.
I would say the problems in poly or open relating are as varied as the problems in any marriage. Just even more problems because you have more personalities, so it's exponentially more complex. But it's incredibly unique. I mean, as humans in relationship, we can make some pretty enormous generalizations. Like,
Yes.
we have some parts of us want security and stability, another part of us wants freedom and adventure. And anytime you get two or more people together, those parts are going to start to war and polarize. So some part of the system is going to say, I want more freedom and this is getting boring. And then the other part's going to be like, but wait, let's move slower. And that happens if you're a mother with kids, it happens in any kind of human system. So we see it just happening more with poly. But that's a wild generalization. The intricacies of each relationship having their unique idiosyncratic like quirks is part of the fun of being a sex and relationship coach, as we get to look under the hood and say, like, what patterns going on here. And even though they feel like they're so unique, they tend to be totally human. And we all, we all have this big problem, which is that we think we should have no problems.
Right. Exactly.
And really, generally, as you do deeper work and you realize, especially if you're doing work in groups, you realize, wow, everybody's got problems. Let me stop making these little molehills into mountains. Let me accept the person as they are with pimples and all. And I will just, love their soul and not their little quirks, and move on, move into more acceptance and unconditional love.
I have a question piggybacking on that. If you were relationship coaching, for instance, a monogamous couple who just came to you and said, listen, we have this raw animal kind of connection where we have great chemistry, but we need to elevate that into the spiritual, into the sacred, which is similar to the title of your book that we're going to talk about shortly. But I'm just curious, if you were coaching someone to tap into that electric other side, like Nicole was saying earlier, that 5D connection, what type of advice would you give a monogamous couple to heighten that sexual connection into the super conscious realm of sensuality, that higher level consciousness into sex itself?
I love it because there's kind of two directions. When there's polarity, when there's a lot of charge and sexual attraction, people can get together and distracted by that kind of chemistry that they stay on that level. And I love this direction of like, let's evolve this. Let's take this charge and give it to God. In Tantra, it's exactly that.
Yes.
Like, let's use the eros and let's redirect it towards these higher intentions. And so I, would, and love working with people, guiding them to do tantric practices, which is to take take that kind of rocket fuel and allow it to allow them to journey with it deeper into the higher realms. And that is with tantric practices, including, breath, sound, eye gaze, mantra, like deep devotional practices. But it all starts with intention. The technique is not as important as like, let's really bring the intention into our erotic dance. But what's exciting for me is that's one direction, right? It's like coming from the earth, from the polarity, and bringing it up to the oneness, towards the heavens. And often I get couples that are coming from the other direction, which is like they are so content and loving and unconditional. There's great, immense love there, and there's no chemistry, no polarity, and it's hard to bring it down into the body.
Oh, wow.
And that's way more common, is to get people who are so devoted and committed to each other, but they've lost their polarity. They've lost the charge. And that deep question of like, how do we breathe it down, bring it into the body, treat the body as holy and sacred ground as we feel about each other's hearts and souls. And that's also a deep, beautiful pilgrimage, into the earth that we are emissaries of in our body temples.
So that can be done then. You can elevate, like you said, with intention, two people coming together. You have worked with people who have lacked that and then took them to that next level.
Absolutely. And it's, simple, but it's not easy, right? So the simple mantra is, I dedicate my desire for you to the divine. I dedicate this attraction or this chemistry to God. And if we, in that mantra at the beginning of our lovemaking, we make that declaration, and then after, in the ejaculation or the orgasm, we're actually dedicating it, like infusing our eros with it at the point of orgasm, which is a holy point, which is a holy moment. That holy moment that brings life into the world can also bring your intentions into manifestation, and you can bring that mantra in during orgasm. And then in the afterglow, when you're done making love and you're holding each other in that sweetness, you can reaffirm, that this incredible event of our coming together is coming together to bring more God through our bodies and into the world.
Oh my gosh, bring more God into our bodies, like physically, through a sexual connection. I love that.
That is so beautiful, and similar to what I was mentioning earlier about how I feel with my husband when we have that afterglow. And on that note, I've heard in your books you talk about conscious erotica. Can you explain what that means? And then I want to hear all about your books.
Sure. So I have one book that I would consider focused on that. In 2020, I wrote a erotic fiction, not so fictitious. In other words, it's more of a memoir that, for very political reasons, it's a true story that got changed into a novel. And that erotic novel chronicles this immense love story that was a deep carnal devotional practice. My girlfriend and I got together every Friday, and we would have tantric lovemaking that sometimes was kinky and wild and fantasy filled, but it always came from we know we're in the play of life and we're playing with our bodies, and we knew that there was some bigger love that we were serving. And so the erotica that came out of it, that love affair inspired a book, and the stories were always, it's very raw and raunchy and animal, but it also had layers and layers of the upper chakras infused in it as well. So I would say conscious, like kink. In this case, it was a poly kinky love story that when people read it, there's a transmission. You know, I mean, it's super fun to read erotica, but it's also amazing when you read it and then you're like, wow, I'm actually getting codes that are deeper than just turning my body on.
That is absolutely fascinating. I am definitely going to order that.
It's like an interactive, physically interactive novel almost.
Yeah.
Like you're channeling, That's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So that's 52 Fridays. And it was published the same year as Sex Shamans, which is what I recommend for your listeners, actually, because this is 20 true narratives, true stories about sacred sexual awakening. And it looks very different for different people. So these, at some point, whether someone was an aerobics instructor or in one case a skydiving instructor, like having all kinds of different jobs, they have this awakening that's like, my soul's purpose is actually to not just go on erotic journeys myself, but lead others into these realms, because shamanism's about having a foot in both worlds, a foot in the physical and then a foot in the invisible. And so I recommend Sex Shamans because it also has exercises and practices that you can do, not just the fun stories you read along, but you then can cultivate your own practice in sexual shamanism.
Amazing. Would that be something that the average couple could pick up this book and say, hey, maybe this could help us. We need this connection. So they could read it together and go through it and
so
share.
I would not this is a book for anybody. It's not for couples. Couples could get great benefit out of it. And there's a couple exercises, but truly, if anybody's wanting to move their lovemaking into a more spiritual path, you have to have the solo practice. It starts with the self.
Wow.
So there's not a lot of hey, couples do this together. It's more like go at your own pace, do your own work, and then come together from fullness.
I love that.
That is beautiful. And is that what sacred sexual healing is?
The book Sacred Sexual Healing is more of an introduction to the role of the Daka or Dakini, a sexual healer, someone who's a sexual shaman and I could see where the confusion is, but sexual healing is more of an intuitive introduction to the whole field of this work. And this work has evolved so much since I wrote that book 18 years ago.
Wow.
So this was the first of its kind that basically said, here's a menu of all the kinds of practices, and healing is one part of it. Then there's using sexual energy to restore your vitality. And then you get into more of the using your sexual energy towards enlightenment. And so it kind of shows, it has the full spectrum of how we can evolve our sexual energy. It's the life force energy and how to use it.
Is there anything else about your books or any of your books you would like to share or recommend, or any last minute commentary you think may be important for the listeners?
Yeah, beyond the books, which, I dedicate so much of my life force energy to writing. And then in the end, you can't learn this stuff from books. You really can't. Right. And they're great reminders or guides, but what's more important than the personal practice, you're dedicated showing up for yourself in some kind of spiritual practice on a daily basis. That can only take you so far without community.
Yeah.
A community actually amplifies the personal practice and takes it to the next level where we can learn more about ourselves by the reflections of others. So, I know with podcasts that we reach people in lonely places that feel like, I don't have a community. I don't live in Los Angeles or San Francisco or New York, but there are online spaces where we can reach out and connect with each other. And even just being parts of podcasts, it's surround yourself with others who are doing what makes you come alive. And that'll help amplify so that you don't feel so lonely, in this process, because the spirituality and sexuality are going to rip us open to something that feels foreign. It touches into the mystery, and we're going to feel alone and scared at the event horizon of the mystery. And having a community, knowing that others traverse those planes and are with you, makes it so much easier to just surrender into the unknown.
Beautiful, beautiful. I love that. Every word of it. Thank you so much to Kamala Devi McClure. And we so appreciate you being here today with us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much for coming on and spending time with us on our third podcast episode. We are so, so grateful, and what a wonderful experience this was. And for the listeners, if you're interested in any of Kamala Devi's books, videos, speaking engagements, or workshops, please visit their website at kamaladevi.com. That's KAMALADEVI.com. Thank you so much for joining us this episode for the Soul Twin Stars podcast. Find us on our podcast Facebook page for Magical Mondays live at 8:30 p.m. Eastern, where we will help you magically slay your weekdays, and for awesome giveaways. For more information about what other spiritual things Nick and I do and offer, visit peacefulnickthemedium.com. That's Nick with just a K. Or to connect with me, Lady Shadowe, soulsandspirits.com is the place to go. If you want to be a guest on one of our shows, we would absolutely love that. Contact us at soultwinstars@gmail.com. See you next Friday at 6 p.m. on Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, Apple Music, Facebook, and on YouTube. Sending you all so many blessings. Thank you so much for joining us, and until next time, know that you are all cherished.